tracking them with the camera.
Sorry, roughly.
When you're watching it, are they going to get that?
Yes, so
Are you zoomed into where you want to be?
Yeah, good.
okay, for now, I'm going to keep the broadcast running because I don't want to lose it. But I've just hidden the camera.
Is that the right angle?
That's another part. I think it's sure.
What's that for?
Also, record. My
I think we're okay.
Okay.
My laptop's going to be here, so I can watch. Yeah. Yeah, you can set that up. I've really no
I don't think we need to record.
Are you positive?
I'm not 100%, but,
I'll be 100%.
but that ain't gonna do anything decent, is it?
It's better than nothing.
The laptop's going to be here.
If you have time to go test it,
It's going to be
fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I'm not going to send that. We could like to test it.
Yeah, I can move this like over there.
Like I said, I don't know. Apologize.
Yeah. But
Let me just check.
it's not going to catch me. Just one on the table.
I'd rather just record it for thingy anyway now.
Shall I get my laptop?
You can do. If you
Well,
want
that might be better. It's a bit higher.
to.
Can you do us a favour and log into the Sapphire website?
Yep.
So we need to. People are going to be hearing the audio because this is on. Hello. Testing. That's it. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the Sapphire offices. My name's Steve Wright. I'm one of the directors here. It's my pleasure to welcome everybody this afternoon to the EAM event. I'm going to be saying just a few words by way of introduction, and we've got a cast of very, very accomplished, learned speakers. I don't include myself in that, but so just a few words about the agenda. You will see that you've got these packs on your chairs, and a copy of the agenda will be in there. And I'll be introducing a few colleagues and some industry experts that we're lucky to have with us, and one of our clients actually. So the session hopefully is a balance of hearing a little bit about the asset management landscape from Malcolm, who I'll hand over to in just a minute or so, and then introducing our solution of choice from Infor. We're lucky to have Phil sat there at the back, who I'll hand over to talk a little bit about that solution, and then we'll have a bit of a break. And then our very own Lee Sands will pick up and we'll get a little bit more interactive and give us a look at some of what Phil's been talking about in action. And then finally, we've got Mark from Sentiment, who are one of our clients, who's going to talk about their recent experience of implementing the solution. So hopefully that gives us a sort of nice rounded agenda to hear about this from a number of different aspects. Just a few housekeeping rules before I hand over. As ever with these things, please keep your phones on, but if you can have them on silent, that would be great. There is Wi-Fi available here, and the SAP guest is what you should look for, and then welcome123 is the password. So if anybody is desperate to tweet and blog about how great the session is, then please feel free to get online. During the breaks and whatnot, obviously there's no smoking or anything up here, so anybody who does want to do that would have to go outside and then go through the rigmarole of going through the airport detector again on the way in. No planned fire alarms, so if there is an alarm, which is very, very audible and very clear, trust me, please follow the people in high-vis jackets through the doors here. Something that is a first for us, actually, we are actually live streaming this event as we speak. So welcome to those of you who are joining us via the internet who couldn't be here in person today. But rest assured, anybody who is here, the feed is just on me and on the screen. None of you guys are appearing on TV. So if you're, I don't know, if you're wanted by the police or anything, then you're absolutely fine. One thing that is really important to us at Sapphire is to get feedback from you guys on these events. We sit and rack our brains in one of the rooms you can see here, coming up with these things, trying to decide what we think people would like to hear about. So rather than us continuing to do that in isolation, if you could spend a few minutes at the end just to fill in your thoughts on whether we met your expectations, the topics that we covered, and anything, good, bad, or, ugly about how we can improve things going forward, that would be much appreciated. And then finally, there'll be a wash-up session at the end with Lee, and then we've got some drinks and some nibbles. So anyone who can stick around, please do stay to talk about stories and experiences. Obviously, the guys on the stream, tough luck. You might get a beer or something and join us in spirit, but we'll have a nice glass of something hopefully at the end here. So that's all from me by way of introduction. Now I'm going to hand over to Malcolm and try and do this without causing too much incident. Here you go. You clip that onto your tie, put it in your pocket. Just watch out for the cable as well.
Yes, no problem. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can everybody hear me? Now, I'm not one of those type of speakers who stands up in front and stands dead still, so I tend to wander around. If I happen to be in the way of something there, just give me a shout. So, unfortunately, the cameraman is probably going to have to follow me. Right. I've got 35 years experience in maintenance management, setting up maintenance systems, and of recent, I've been focusing a lot on asset management. So what's the difference between asset management and a maintenance management? And that's what we're going to touch base on over here. There is a subtle difference between the two, and there's a very nice article. If you go and take a look at the Institute of Asset Management, you can pick up an article from them which details the difference between managing assets and asset management. All right. And at this stage, that one doesn't work.
The dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Since early in my term, our efforts in space have been under review. With the advice of the Vice President, who is Chairman of the National Space Council, we have examined where we are strong and where we are not, where we may succeed and where we may not. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. I believe we possess all the resources and talents necessary, but the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
Now, everybody may be saying, well, what is JFK? Oh, if I can find where the mouse is again.
For we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. Despite the striking fact that most of the scientists that the world has ever known are alive and working today, the vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
Thank you, Lee.
that's okay.
We need some technical expertise around.
Thanks for being out.
Right. Okay, so back into the story. What did JFK actually do for us at that stage? He set a clearly defined goal. All right? Without a clearly defined goal, would they have had the money for the space program? It was a clearly defined goal, it was a time-bounded goal, and it provided the funding. They knew they had the expertise. So the reality is, if you think about it in terms of asset management, that's exactly what he was doing. He was setting out how they were going to achieve this goal. The details of how they were going to do it were not his responsibility. That was the rest of the people of the team. So, something that ISO 55000 requires is what they refer to as the line of sight. So everybody from the uppermost levels to the lowest levels in the organization know what your goals are. And here's an example of it. So when Kennedy went to the NASA Center in 1962, he saw a floor sweeper, a guy walking past with a broom in his hand. And he went to the guy and said, well, what's your role here? And the guy said, I'm here to put a man on the moon. Does anybody think a janitor can put a man on the moon? The reality is no. But without that janitor, who would keep the place clean? And if the place isn't kept clean, how are the other people going to focus on what their delivery is? So everybody within the organization must know what the goals are. Without that knowledge of the goals, you actually tend to lose sight of what you're there for. So, how does this relate to asset management? Firstly, there are four fundamentals that asset management is all about. It's about value, alignment, leadership, and assurance. First of all, value. An asset is there to provide value to the organization. If it's not providing a value to the organization, you don't need it. It's as simple as that. Now, if you think about it, NASA is a tremendous value to the American organization. As a people, NASA itself doesn't make the money. But what they do have is the spin-offs from the technology that they develop. And that is what they actually pass back into industry. And that's how they make their money. So NASA is funded by the taxpayer. And the taxpayer receives the technology out of NASA, reproduces it, and they pay tax on it. So if you think about it, it's a way that they actually boost their economy. Secondly, alignment. Well, when he made that statement, we will put a man on the moon by the end of this decade, the goal was absolutely clear. Didn't say how they were going to do it, but the goal was absolutely clear. Everybody knew that goal. Leadership. Well, leadership is about making the tough decisions. Somebody quoted me something yesterday, and I'm not sure about the truth or validity of it. President Kennedy at one stage said, I'm here to make the really tough decisions. Because the easy decisions I expect everybody else to make. But you'd be surprised how many of those tough decisions get made by the barber or by my dentist. So it's not necessary that the decision is one that cannot be made. it's one that requires a bit of forethought, a bit of thinking, etc. That's what leadership is about. And then assurance. They knew full well that they didn't have the technology at the time, but they did have the people, and the people were their most important asset. And those people were the ones who were able to make that a reality. So, is it about asset management? The reality is yes. So, where does maintenance fit in terms of asset management? So here I've got a nice great big flow diagram, and what it shows is a number of processes. So, this lower element here is all about your capital project program. The upper element is about your asset management. All right? You need a form of asset registration. When you register your assets, you need to make sure that you can actually have them in a known entity, because somebody on one side may register an entire train as an asset, and somebody else may just register the bogie as an asset. You need to have a clearly defined standard as to how you're going to register it. The petrochemical industry have actually gone out and drawn up a standard for that. ISO 14224. It's the only standard that actually defines it for you. The rest of the industries, guys, you're on your own. Okay? So you need to have a process that defines how you're going to manage your asset registration. You need to have a process to define your maintenance requirements. Now, I can guarantee that most of the people in the room here, like many others, what you do is you take the O&M manual and you read through the instructions of the O&M manual, and that's the maintenance I'm going to do. Okay? It's been proven in a number of industries that around about 80% of those tasks are useless. So what's the process that you're going to use to define what maintenance you do? You need to have a process. You move on. Business criticality review. I know they keep on trying to change the names of that nowadays, and it has various different names. But it's all about risk management. If you have an asset that is responsible for doing something in your organization, what is the risk of that asset failing? And what are my countermeasures? You need to have those in place, otherwise you don't have a decent asset management system. On the right-hand side, so great, we've got this brand new project kicking in, and they tell us we're going to supply you with the following assets. Okay, so great, what do I do with these assets? I need to go and make sure I've got how critical it is to the business. I need to go and make sure that we define what we're going to do, and I need to go and make sure that I register them. Because if I don't register them, how do I maintain them? Then, so the question I've got, where does an enterprise asset management sit within this environment? Right there. Managing the day-to-day operation. We'll get onto a bit more detail about that in a few minutes. But all of those surrounding activities there are used to support and put that thing in place. So asset management, if you think about it, is far wider than just an enterprise system or managing your people to do their jobs. Far wider. All right. So, where does ISO 55000 fit in? ISO have now started developing what they call management standards, in amongst which I'm sure you all have heard of ISO 9000. ISO 9000 is a quality management system. Does it prove, or does it give you a better, a higher quality product? No. What it says is how you are going to manage your quality. And that's what we have to remember with the asset management system. ISO 55000 is not going to give you the ability to maintain your equipment better. What it will do is say that you will have a process by which you will define, manage, maintain from the start of life to the end of life of your assets. There's several others. ISO 50000 being the energy management standard. Occupational health and safety has recently changed from OHSAS 1801 to ISO 45000, etc. And if you want to look at more management standards, you can go and take a look at that website. So, asset management, we know, is the wider scope. It looks at the entire process, from bringing assets in to the destruction of assets, and sets up the management processes around each of those. So it's a strategically focused approach to make meaningful decisions related to the development, maintenance, repair, rehabilitation, and preservation of assets. With one key thing: an asset is there to deliver value. Without delivering value, we might as well not have it. Maintenance is any action that is intended to retain the item in, restore it to a state where it can perform its required function. That's about managing an asset. All right? And ultimately, you need to use a mix of the following 4 strategies. And I know people are going to say, oh, but what about this strategy? What about PDM? What about all the rest of them? There are basically 4 strategies. It's condition-based, it's time or cycle-based, it's run to fail, or it's design out failure. And all of the others are basically a mix of those. And you may then turn around and say, well, okay, so where does the latest fad in asset management come in, where they are taking, what's it? I've forgotten the name of it. It's effectively, it's gathering data. It's another form of condition monitoring. All right? What's an enterprise asset management system? Well, the enterprise asset management system, it's used to generate what maintenance needs to be done, and it's used to record the maintenance that does get done. It's the true power behind your ability to perform asset management correctly. If I don't have the information, I have nothing. I'll use an example that I used a little earlier. If I have 20 motors on my site, 20 electric motors, and 10 of them have failed, do I have a problem with that type of motor? Any guesses? Possibly. It sounds possible, hey? If I go and look at my enterprise asset management system, and I read up in the asset management system that all of those motors failed for different reasons, do I still have a problem with that particular type of motor? And the answer is no. Without the information, I can be led up a blind alley. I need the information. All right? So the top won't happen unless you've actually got the bottom in place. Unless you have a means of recording and bringing the information together. Now, I think it was 2005, I put together this particular slide. And what it is it just indicates where maintenance is going. First generation maintenance was very much, you fix it when it broke. In between time, you never touch it. Second generation was when they started introducing condition monitoring activity, time-based maintenance activities, where they would stop a piece of equipment, perform a maintenance activity on it, restart, and off they go again. Third generation, the introduction of condition monitoring. And what they were really trying to do was extend the reliability of that equipment so that they didn't have to maintain it as often. We're now currently in what's termed the fourth generation of maintenance. The fourth generation is where we actually start using statistical data to drive our maintenance. And maintenance becomes more of an adaptive system. Say, for example, I perform an analysis on a piece of equipment, and I'll say every week we need to inspect it. Just a visual inspection, and that visual inspection will take 5 minutes. All right? Do I need to do it every week? The rule says you have to do it within the PF curve. Okay? But I decided I don't want to do it every week, I want to do it every 2 weeks. How risky is that to my decision making? Well, that depends if I can use data to prove that I am not wasting my time. So maintenance becomes more adaptive. Time-based maintenance in itself is not necessarily, or cycle-based maintenance in itself is not necessarily wrong, but it could also be costly. Just imagine I go and inspect a motor for 20 years every week. How much is that going to cost me? And if I increase the length of time to every 2 weeks, I've effectively halved my maintenance cost, haven't I? All right? Those are the things we need to think of, and that's what fourth generation maintenance is all about. So, getting back to the space theme. What maintenance do they do in the space station? Well, to be honest, they're not going to share that with any of us, are they? But we can take a look at the failures that have occurred on the space station, and we can very quickly work out what they do. So, in 2004, there was an air leak. 2006, there was an issue where they were venting gas. And most recently, there was the leak in the Soyuz orbital module. What that tells me is they're doing some level of pressure monitoring on their system. In addition to that, they're also going to have to be calibrating that pressure module just to make sure it's not going to give them false readings. Vibration monitoring. 2007, they picked up a rotary joint on the solar panels where the bearing had failed. 2009, there was excessive vibration when they had to do a reboost, when they had to lift it back into its orbit again. So by purely reading the background information about failures recorded, you can quickly start picking up and understanding what level of maintenance is being done on a site. Now, there's another one over there. You see, in 2003, after the Columbia disaster, they almost shut the International Space Station down because they could not get anybody up there to come and remove the waste. So anybody tell me that cleaning is actually not a maintenance task? Cleaning is. Any kind of activity that is going to retain the value or deliver value to your organization within the asset framework becomes a task that you need to monitor. There was a torn solar panel in 2007, which implies they must be doing a level of visual inspections. If they're not doing it, they wouldn't have seen it. Anybody tells me maintenance must always be done. Well, actually, there's two types of maintenance. There's a design out failure and there's a run to failure. Design out failure means I try and eliminate the failure before it occurs. And then run to failure means I leave it to keep on going, and when it eventually dies, I'll do something about it. Well, Voyager 1 was launched in 1977. It's still out there. It's been going for over 41 years. It's currently 13.4 billion miles away from Earth. Now, Anybody volunteering to go and maintain that piece of equipment? It's something that you're going to just run to fail. When it stops talking to us, we leave it. All right? But you make sure that your design is such that it's going to give you a reasonable life. They didn't expect it to last this long, just by the way. And if you consider that space is the most hostile environment, it's doing pretty well. So, one of the questions you need to be asking yourself, you're all about enterprise asset management systems. Well, what value is an EAM going to actually bring to your organization? Because if it doesn't add value, you don't want it. Okay, so now you need to start looking at, and here's a couple of possibilities. If I have my EAM properly set up, it will give me a comprehensive list of assets. If it doesn't, it means that I'm not actually carrying out activities on those assets, am I? It will report on asset and component failures. Now, I said to somebody a little earlier, don't tell me you've replaced a motor. Don't tell me you've replaced a component. Tell me why. Go back to my example that I gave earlier. If I didn't know why I had those 20 motors or those 10 motors replaced, I wouldn't know that I don't have a problem. All right? And the system, the way you set it up, is going to be able to give you that information. All right? The other thing about these enterprise asset management systems, in reality, for the likes of obsolescence. Obsolescence comes in two forms. One, I no longer need the asset. Two, the equipment or the asset or components within the asset are no longer being manufactured. And therefore, what am I going to do to repair that piece of equipment? A large airframe manufacturer in Europe, one of their manufacturing sites is their SCADA system is running on an old 8088 processor. How many of those are available? Do you know how they keep that maintained? They go onto eBay and buy old computer equipment. Okay? I'm not saying it's wrong, but in terms of obsolescence, how critical is that to their business? If it's not adding value, why have it? If it is adding value, make sure it's up to date. All right? Then the last one, identifying and eliminating bad actors. How many of you have heard the term a Monday car? How many of you want to own a Monday car? Now, about 20 years ago, if people spoke to you about a Monday car, everybody knew what you were talking about. It's a car that was manufactured on Monday, when everybody who was doing the manufacturing had a hangover. As a net result, the car really wasn't that well put together, and it usually gave you a lot of grief. All right? Now, but bad actors can come in the form of assets, in terms of components, in terms of employees, and suppliers. All right? Let me give you another example of that. So, I've got 4 Formula One drivers over there. And that's their statistics for wins and retirements. Anybody guess who was the best? So who was the first one? Who's the top one of those 4 names? Schumacher. All right? Who was the second? Hamilton. No. Any other takers? Mansell. And so it goes down. Statistically speaking, a driver, if I was the asset manager for the Formula One racing team, which driver do I want? Lewis Hamilton. He has the highest percentage of wins and the lowest percentage of retirements. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of asset management. It's more than just making sure the asset's in a good condition. It's about the whole field around it. What are we doing to make sure that we have the best chance of survival? Right. So, as with anything like this, I need to challenge you guys. So what are you going to do about your EAM solution that is going to add value to your business? Is it just going to be a big Outlook calendar where everything happens on a frequent timer? Is it just going to be a place where I throw a whole lot of information and run away and never look at it? Is it going to be something that I can draw information out of it? Because I need to be able to pull that information back. Otherwise, I have no value in the system. Yes, it's managing my day-to-day running and maintenance and such like. But if I can't pull information out of it, I've got nothing, have I? So my challenge to you people is, what are you going to do to make your system the best it can be? There's the old saying, it's not what you put in, it's what you get out. Final comment, remember, it's not rocket science. Okay? Any questions? Yes?
Firstly, that was great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. One thing I find with my work setting up an EAM is a lot of what I do is I'm an enabler. So providing an asset register doesn't actually generate value inherently. It's an enabler generating value.
Yes.
In terms of capturing benefits to the business when you're implementing an EAM, I want to show that I'm not just doing it for the sake of it, I'm delivering a benefit to the business. What do you see as a good way of doing that to show that I'm winning?
Very interesting question, because there's a number of players in this field, all right? And I'm not talking about the various enterprise asset management systems you can get. There are a number of players within your organization. Now, my learning is this. What you really need to be doing is you need to make sure that the system is simple to use. The more complex it is, the more difficult it is for people to put information back and take information out, the less likely they are going to do it. All right. So if you think about your asset list in itself, it's an enabler for other people. All right. Make sure that your asset list, there is commonality in the asset list. So I don't go from one site to another site and I have to recreate the wheel again. All right. Make sure that the system, how you've set it up, is as simple as possible, not only for the feedback. Well, let's face it, guys. How many engineers became engineers because they liked writing stories? Very, very few. So the simpler you can make it, the easier you can make it for these guys to feed information back, the more likely you are to get information. So how can you make sure that you can demonstrate it? Ultimately, by making sure that it's easy for people to use. And if it's easy for people to use, you can gather the information out the back end of it, and that's what you're able to show to the business. Okay.
Would you say there's a fine line between the amount of assets you register compared to what you've done? What I tend to find is that you tend to register a lot of that down to very component level. The amount of time you spend on the registered assets, do you get that value back? How would you deal with it?
Knowing you come from Heathrow, I have to say, the way that I register an asset down to a maintainable level. Okay? So if I register a train, I register the train. I won't go and register the bogie. I won't go and register the drive on the bogie. So what I do is I look at it in terms of maintainability. At what level will I maintain an asset? Once I know the level that I'm going to maintain the asset, Everything below that becomes part of your bill of materials. Okay? I tend to find that people quite often dig too deep in terms of asset registration. And this is where, if you look at ISO 14224, it's actually a good reference because they actually show you, they ring mark the items that need to be registered as a single asset. And the reason that they've done that, and there's a couple of areas where you scratch your head and you think to yourself, is that right or isn't it? But when you think that they'll register a compressor, for example, and they will register a drive. Two separate things. And the reason for it is because the compressor and its control system can be replaced and replicated and such like. And the drive can be one of 4 different drive types. That's why they register them separately. But it's a good guideline if you have the opportunity and you're at that stage. The worst problem you can ever do is actually take it too low. Because if you take it too low, so for example, if I have a conveyor, that's the level I would stop my registration. If I take the registration down to the motor on a conveyor, that's too far because I'm not going to maintain that motor independently. I will maintain the conveyor. All right? Does that answer your question? One of the key things, you remember that first, or that process flow diagram that I showed you? One of the key things there is you need to establish to what extent you're going to register assets. And if you don't have that clearly defined, it should be the very first thing you do. Because I tell you, there's nothing worse than an asset management system that's full of rubbish. Okay. Any questions, guys? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You actually touch on a very interesting subject there. And it's one of those, you can do the same in terms of an electrical system. So I have a motor or I have a pipeline between A and B. Do I register the pipeline? Do I register the cable between my breaker and the motor? Or does that form part of something else? You need to make sure that you do define the level at which you do register it. And pipelines, particularly because of the wear in pipelines and such like, you should be registering pipelines from where it starts to where it ends as a single asset. Yeah. Yeah. Well, 14 days. Yeah. It happens. It definitely happens. We had a number of years ago, we had a situation with a nitrogen compressor where an I2P converter, which is a little unit that costs 20 quid, kept us out of production for 12 hours because nobody actually considered that it was a worthwhile spare to keep. All right, comes back to the analysis. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. So it's just enter. Is it? Okay. Sorry? Okay. Good afternoon. My name's Phil Balance. I work for Infor. I'm going to talk about one of those
enterprise asset management systems that Malcolm's just referred to. I am completely biased because it is the one system that I'm going to talk about. So I firstly wanted to talk about Infor. Infor is a software company. If you've ever heard of us, we have partnered with Sapphire for 20 years, something like that. So we've been long-standing partners, and Infor as a company is the third largest private technology company in the world. We have about 16,500 employees. We turn over about 3 billion as an organization. So we do a lot of things, of which one of the things that we do is enterprise asset management, which is the area that I focus in. So I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about that. Obviously, Malcolm's covered a whole load of stuff about what is that, but I'm just going to talk about, firstly, what is an asset? And it's fairly fundamental because it goes back to all of the questions that are raised. You know, what do you define as an asset? Well, an asset is really something that belongs to an organization and performs a function within that organization. And if it doesn't work, the organization cannot deliver what it's designed to do. So if they're a bus company and the bus doesn't work, then they can't carry their passengers and they can't perform the service that they're set out to do. And there's lots of different asset types, and clearly some of the questions earlier were, you know, well, how far do I go down in my asset structure and what do I define? And there is a practical limit and there is a technology limit. And we kind of don't have a limit. You can have whatever you like, but the reality is you're not going to go down to every nut and bolt because it just doesn't make sense to try and manage at that level. So we work with lots of organizations and they're all doing the same thing. They're all managing and maintaining assets that are critical to their business. So whether it's a road, whether it's a bus, whether it's a production facility, or it's a bridge, or whatever it is, they are all assets for those organizations. And there's typically kind of 5 things that people look at from an operational perspective, which really centers around reliability. So when you buy the asset in the first place, you want to make sure that it delivers for as long as it can, as reliably as it can. I was interested to see the 41 years for the item in space. They probably didn't think it would last 41 years, and it's still going. And as you say, I didn't see any hands go up to go and maintain it. So reliability is a key issue, and that really centers around maintaining the asset efficiently and effectively. And there's lots of arguments to say whether you do it, you know, as per the manual or you don't, as Malcolm touched on earlier. We also have to do it from a health and safety perspective in a safe way. It needs to be from an operational perspective and from a maintenance perspective, we have to maintain it, and it has to be safe. It has to be safe for our operators and so on. Sustainability is another area that's kind of key from an energy consumption perspective. It has to be efficient for our organizations. It has to consume less energy than the old asset did. You know, we're seeing electric buses now and hydrogen buses and all sorts of other ways of trying to make the assets more efficient in their use. And efficiency I've already mentioned. And the final thing is compliance. And compliance is forever changing. So there's always new legislation and new regulations that are coming in that we have to comply with. So the only thing that we can guarantee what we're doing today is we won't be doing in a year's time. We'll be doing something slightly different. So change is always upon us. So Malcolm touched on ISO 55001, actually, not 55,000. I didn't update the slide. So I'm not going to touch on that. But from within our application, we comply with, we're ISO 55001 compliant. So what we also look at is we look at the kind of stakeholders within the organization from an asset management perspective. So the first stakeholder that we tend to interface with is the C level. So what they're interested in is effectively cost reduction. My experience with management is the further up the management chain you go, the less information you provide them. They only really want to see numbers at the top. How efficient are we? How much is it costing us? Have we reduced our costs? Are we being more efficient? And the other area is risk. Because if something goes wrong with those assets and somebody gets hurt, somebody gets injured, and it's a failure of the business, then the person that's liable for that is the C-level. So they're the ones that are interested at that kind of top level. The next stakeholder in the chain of events, and there's probably many others as we go through, but there's kind of 3 levels here, is the operational people. So the people that are responsible for making sure that asset is available, reliable, and that we've got the inventory to support that asset. So that's really the kind of operational level. And then the third level that we kind of touch on is the maintenance technicians. So the people at the end of the chain that are making sure that that asset is repaired and making sure that they are doing the things that they need to do. And they really need access to information, and they need it to be easy. Because if you make it complicated, then they'll find ways of not updating the system. And it goes back to all the things that were raised earlier. If you haven't got that information flowing back into the system to update the system, then you can't look at the history, you can't look and predict, you can't do all the things that were mentioned before. So we're trying to make it easy for those technicians to update the jobs, to receive the jobs on a mobile device. Everybody's got a mobile device these days, whether it's a phone or a tablet. So the technicians are out and about, and they're updating the information, and they're doing the work. And it has to be easy to do, because they're not there as computer technicians. They're there to maintain the bits of equipment. So that's the kind of third stakeholder. And what that does, if you do it correctly, it drives value to the organization. And these are just 3 examples. We do quite a lot of work for organizations in doing what we call value engineering. So we go into a business and we look at the business and we come up with the value that implementing an enterprise asset management system will derive for that organization. And there are some surprising numbers sometimes. And there are surprising areas that people don't really look at and consider. One particular bus company that I was talking to recently, they have 500 spare buses that sit there in the event that if a bus breaks down, they can put that new bus into play. Now, they've got a lot of buses, but that's a huge amount of buses, and they're not exactly cheap. So that's just a simple example of where if you can improve your maintenance regime, and you can cut down on the amount of costs associated with it. So these are just some examples. I'm not going to major on this. So we have a system called Infor EAM, Enterprise Asset Management. We like to show this because it puts us at the top, which is quite nice. This is a Gartner view, slightly out of date, but we're still at the top. So this is Gartner looking at the industry and defining who's good, who's bad, who's indifferent, and it's very subjective, but it's Gartner's view on the world. So we've got analysts looking at us and seeing where we fit within the landscape. So in terms of the system as a whole, it really covers all of the things that Malcolm touched on in terms of the sort of maintenance side. So the first thing is the asset. So we don't really mind what that asset is. We don't care what that asset is. It can be a building. It can be a floor within a building. It can be a room. It can be an air conditioning system. It can be a vehicle. It can be a production piece of equipment. Or it can be a linear asset. So it can be a piece of track in rail. It can be a pipeline. It can be a road. It doesn't make any difference. You define what
Yeah, look, Andrew Chapman on that.
Testing, testing. I've done. Just now.
Hi guys, welcome back. I think everybody is back. Maybe less of an audience now that I'm talking. Maybe some people were scared. As the slide suggests, my name is Lee Sands. I work for Sapphire Systems. So firstly, welcome to our London office and thank you for attending today. I'm going to talk to you about our sort of best practice approach to implementing Infor EAM. Just a little bit about myself. I've been at Sapphire seven or 8 years. About 10 plus years experience of implementing asset management solutions, both as a customer, so I guess like the guys over there implementing solutions bought from a vendor from a bidding perspective as well, but also as a full-blown consultant implementing solutions all over the world in a number of different industries. So what I'm going to do today is I'll first of all just talk to you a little bit about Sapphire Systems, about our relationship with Infor, why we've decided to use and sell and implement the EAM solution, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about what we're doing around best practice and our sort of implementation methodology. Because the first speakers took so long to speak, I might have to whiz through a little bit quicker. So if I'm talking very, very fast, that's the reason. So I guess everyone here doesn't know about Sapphire, so I'll just take a little bit of time to tell you about what we are and what we do. So we've been around since 1993. We are a software services and support company, and we deal with solutions across the board. So we're talking about asset management today, but we actually deal with ERP, financial management, business intelligence, expense management. We have development teams. We have offices all over the world, and we kind of provide a lot of different services. So we have 24-hour support, like I said, we have some development, we have project management capability. So we're kind of not just about asset management, but I think, as Malcolm was talking about earlier, that asset management isn't just about sort of delivering your assets, it covers a whole wide range of things. So we take the standpoint that, you know, we provide accounting systems that integrate to asset management solutions, because that's all part of actually asset management as a practice. Some statistics about us, maybe not quite as impressive as Phil's slide about Infor's. 3 billion, we're just under 3 billion at 36 million, but we've got 1,000+ customers across all of our product range. We are predominantly a client-facing organisation, so we are 250+ staff, majority of which are consultants, project managers, account managers, people that are working with you. We provide, because we're international, we have offices in the US, over in Manila, in South America. So because of that, we're able to offer 24-hour sort of support as standard. And we're kind of privileged in a way that we're not really tied to one software vendor. We get to explore the market and identify the solutions that we believe best fit the needs of our clients. So we work predominantly with Infor, as Phil mentioned before, but we also work with SAP and a host of other software vendors as well. And it's kind of important to us that we deliver solutions that match the requirements of our clients. So I'll talk a little bit about why we work with EAM after this, but we are in a way sort of independent in how we choose what we deliver. We have multilingual capabilities. If anyone wants us to do anything in kind of Spanish or something, we have that sort of capability as well. And I guess the main thing about us is that we really do employ experts in the field. So anybody that you deal with at Sapphire across any of the product ranges has been doing that for usually 5+ years, and has some kind of expertise in that area. On the asset management side, I look around at one of my team members in particular, who's a very experienced consultant, as he likes to be known, and everyone is of that sort of nature with us. So we do rely heavily on the expertise, because we don't only provide the software, the services are all obviously very important to us. And as Phil mentioned in his last presentation, have the best software in the world, but if it's implemented incorrectly, then you're not going to get any value from that. So we work heavily on that. And I had this slide up because I just wanted to talk about the fact that we at Sapphire, we're departmentalized. So yes, we have asset management consultants, but we work very heavily with the finance guys and the ERP guys because we understand from a best practice point of view that sometimes we need to leverage the experience of other people. We're not trained accountants, but we have an idea of accounting, but we actually have a team within Sapphire that we can lean upon to get that experience. Because again, asset management as a practice is not just about maintaining your assets, it's about the procurement processes, it's about integration to finance, it's about paying your suppliers. All those things are very important. So when we talk about best practice, we talk about it from a holistic perspective, everything. And we have business intelligence as a separate department, so we're looking at a number of different business intelligence solutions that sit across our solutions, because again, I think it was mentioned earlier, getting that is what even more important than actually just putting it in. We have cloud services, so we have lots of technical expertise. We have dedicated project management teams who work to your Prince 2s and other kind of project management processes, so that everything we do is departmentalized. So we are experts in each of the areas that we have. So why Infor EAM? So we've made a choice at Sapphire, and we've been working with this solution for probably 10 plus years, and we made a choice at that point to work with EAM, and we've made that our solution within the asset management space to provide our best practice templates to work with this. And I like this slide because I think it shows the solution's been around for a long time, and you can see that evolution by what the screens look like, and it's a very mature product, and it's evolved not just on the fact that the screens look better, but the functionality within it every single year increases. So as you upgrade, as standard, you're getting health and safety features, you're getting case management, you're getting the mingle stuff. Everything moves on, and Infor listens to the client base, and we as Sapphire are in a position where we can feedback stuff from our clients to actually change the way the software works, to improve the way the software works. And it's just a very user-friendly solution as well. So anyone who's used it has seen it before. It's clean. There's a big focus on usability. And as consultants, we prefer to work with something that's easy to work with. We're not developers ourselves. We're not here to develop software. We're here to configure software and make it user-friendly for everyone else. So that's one of the reasons why we, as consultants, like to use it from kind of a commercial perspective and where it sits within the marketplace. We found that EAM fits into a nice gap within the market, in that yes, it's a tier 1 solution. Yes, it fits in with your IBM products and other sort of SAP PMs, but it doesn't go in at the same sort of cost and the same length of implementation, because 2-3 week implementations is not a dream. That can happen. You may kill yourself trying to implement it in some places, but it's something that can happen. And I'll talk about our best practice and how we're trying to actually get asset management solutions within shorter periods, and how we're trying to work towards that. And because it's a configuration tool, because it's something that is user-friendly, it's drag and drop, it's changing a label, it's not about writing code and these sorts of things. It means that once we implement a project, we can hand it over to you. And we have many examples that clients just keep going with themselves and do really exciting stuff with the software, and are able to feed back to us, and we can feed that back to our clients, or we can implement it into our best practice solution, so that we interact and have a relationship with our clients in terms of how we're working. And then it's not the other end of the scale either, because I'm sure that everybody here has seen or at some point used a solution that's probably cheap, goes in, it's great, it does what it does, but it doesn't scale. And when you try and find someone to do anything, there's nobody on the market that can deal with it, because it's something that's so bespoke. It never upgrades. There's never any new functionality. So we find it fits into that niche really well. And we've been working with this before it was Gartner's Magic Quadrant, and we believed that it would be a solution that it's really turned into. And the out-of-the-box functionality, like Phil mentioned, is fantastic. You get pretty much everything as standard, and you can almost sort of plug and play with it. So for us as a software provider, as an implementation partner, it means that we can position it in a way that we want to at both ends of the scale. So just to, I guess, talk a little bit about what we're doing at Sapphire. So over the last year, 18 months, we've taken the approach that we want to implement best practice. Now, we always wanted to implement best practice, but what we're trying to do is, I guess, provide a template that's a footing for everything to start from. And what that means is that we have taken the time to document what we believe are the workflows that should go around all of the processes within a management system. So we're talking about planned and unplanned maintenance, requisitioning, purchase ordering, inventory movements, and we've documented what we believe to be best practice based on the experience of a number of consultants across a number of industries. Now, it may be controversial to suggest that every industry works the same, but an asset is an asset, as was mentioned before, and you have planned and unplanned maintenance. So although there are some different things within different industries, we do find that the fundamental foundations are the same. And rather than starting with nothing, we believe that it's much better to start with what we believe is our best practice and move on from that. And that's what we've started to do. And that's drawn a number of benefits for both us and for our clients, in that it gives us metrics straight off the bat. So it means that because we have these standard processes that go straight in, we can actually build role-based dashboards and charts, and we've got 50, 60 plus of these different metrics that just plug straight into our processes, straight into the fields and the rules and the logic that we've put into these systems. And there's no configuration. It just means as soon as you start putting your data in, you're getting output, you're getting value straight from the word go. So we're seeing things like frequent failure assets is a standard thing, slow moving stock, how compliant are you with your PPMs, that sort of thing. And it's all just standard stuff so that anyone that logs in can see where you are. And we're trying to force a very quick return on investment for our customers, so that yes, we can implement in 2-3 weeks, but we can do a very good implementation within 2-3 weeks, which gives you almost everything that you need to get a very quick return on investment on a product like this. And that's great, I guess, if you're moving from a paper-based system, or if you're moving from a smaller solution and you're doing a one-site implementation, or it's a very simplistic business that you have. We appreciate that some companies have a much more complicated model, and your maintenance systems may be a bit more complicated, but it doesn't mean that we can't start from this standing point and firstly reduce the time it takes to implement, but secondly challenge the processes that you currently have. So it's important for us that we don't just implement something that is the same as you had before, just a different looking system. It's about us going in and saying, right, well, we work in this industry, we work with this company, we work with this other sort of environment, they do this. What have you thought about doing that? That's what we believe is the best. And I think we're beginning to find that it firstly reduces that time, but it gives us that flexibility, and it gives us the metrics right out of the box, like I said. So this is what we're doing as a company, and we will start every implementation from this sort of base. And it gives you the documentation as well. So if you think about the implementation, all of the designs, the documentation, the project documents that come along with that, and the cost it takes to put all that together, we have all of that already. And it's about amending stuff rather than starting from scratch. This is my pyramid. I put this in because I saw that Malcolm had some good diagrams, and I felt I had to get something in that matched that sort of quality. So. So what we're trying to say, this is how we implement now. So obviously you'll make a software selection. Now for us to implement this, that would be Infor EAM, and that's the one that we promote. That's what Gartner suggests is the best, and we have decided to build our template model on top of this. So we then deploy our best practice template, just drop it straight into your newly installed system or your upgraded system. Then we apply some industry focus. So we appreciate that not everybody will have the same stuff, but we've done things in many of the industries. So if I think about what we've done in facilities management, talking about we've done condition-based survey work to justify capital spender on refurbishments. We've done lots of work around that. We can just plug that in. If we talk about energy, we've done things around joint venture billing and AFE management, which we can plug into that. If I talk about transport, we've done things implementing integrations to Genius, which is a planning system for trains and mileage tracking and things like that. We've done that. We can plug that in for transport customers. For manufacturing, we put things in about bringing your plan maintenance forward when you've got production downtime, so that means you're not putting things down more frequently. So linear assets on infrastructure. When I look at mining, Mark will be talking after me. We've done some things around manifesting with them, which we can then deploy into our best practice template for that as well. So we put two layers on. Firstly, we put our bog standard layer for best practice, and then we can apply some industry focus based on what we've learned across the industries that we've done implementations before. Again, as been mentioned several times today, everything has an integration generally. So that's obviously the next thing, and EAM is completely open for integration. There's a whole host of different ways to do that. With the ION technology that Phil mentioned before, we have our own integration tools as well. So we have teams of people that can do that integration, but we're fully functional and ready for that, and we can document everything around that. I'll be talking about the project methodology next, about how we actually implement asset management solutions. We found, probably over the last few years, it doesn't really follow the sort of standard waterfall project management process that an ERP solution may follow. So we have a much more agile approach to the way in which we deploy asset management solutions, and I'll take you through that after this. And then the final thing is for us, which is important for us, is to maintain those relationships with our clients, so that after you are live, we let you know about new functionality, we let you know about things that we're doing with other people. We try to push things that we're doing elsewhere so that we can obviously keep working with you, or at least give you the skills that you need to take the solution forward yourselves as well. Not quite as good as your diagram, Malcolm, but I like to think that for 15 minutes work, that's pretty good. So this is a slide. It's a very summarized view of how we're implementing projects within EAM. So I won't go through the whole thing, but the main highlights about how we do things are we like to take a kind of prototyping approach, which is here. So we'll go through our normal things. The project team training is very important for us. We like to make sure that we get all the stakeholders in a room and we show them the whole solution. Even if you're a stores guy, we want to show you how the maintenance parts work. We want to show you how the procurement works, because everything ties together. And we find it's very important to get everybody in that room initially, take them through the whole solution, so when it comes to people arguing about processes, you'll be aware of what your knock-on effect will be from your part of the business, and we find that works quite nicely. So once we go through our design and our installations, or if you're SaaS-based, just obviously logging into your new application, the building part is where we look for the agile approach, which is that we like to try and prototype things. So especially with integration, so it's quite nice to build something, sit down with some users, critique it, go back, rebuild, go for another prototype, and have a cycle that keeps going on until we get to a point where we have a solution that everybody's happy with. And that's generally how these solutions tend to work for us, in that we may sit down with the maintenance guys and go through the work order management processes, make some tweaks, then we might introduce some of the stores guys in the second prototype and start to work out how that all works together. And we can go through that as many times as we need, and the approach is very flexible depending on what a client needs in order to get this through the door. Obviously we go for our training, and then the UAT part is another area which we've really tried to make a bit more user-friendly, a bit more versatile for us. So UAT, I think historically has always been that you as the client, or you as the receiver of the software, will say, yeah, we're happy with that, that's great, it works as we want. But sometimes people might say something works and we get actually to use the system and it might not work as you want to. So we add a new step into our UAT, which is that we expect you to demonstrate back to us that you can use the software and that it does meet the criteria that we set out at the beginning of this project, so that we are also happy to go live and that you are happy to go live, and that the solution you get and the users get is one that works for you. Because if you implement something that doesn't work from the word go, it's very hard to then convince end users that it's going to be something that's going to be beneficial for them in the future. So it's a very critical part of the project, and we think it's important that not only you agree to it, but we also agree to it as well. And one of our project managers is over there and I'm sure she would reiterate that. That's Adele over there, so maybe when we're networking you can have a chat with Adele about this, because this is your slide, Adele. Just a quick, I think, slide about return on investment. From board level downwards at Sapphire, it's all about the return on investment, and that's what's really drilled into us as a company, is that we understand that projects are a big investment for clients, and there has to be some kind of ROI in it. So it's important for us to go into projects understanding that there will be some kind of return on investment, whether it be time, money, improvements in safety. And we do try ourselves to document what those returns on investment will be. And Phil mentioned before, but Infor and ourselves, we do a kind of value engineering process where we can go in pre-project to identify what kind of ROIs will you have. And as Phil said, it might be kind of shocking in some cases to realise some of the areas that you can reduce your costs and obviously get some value out of a system like this. And that's something that we're focusing more on, because it's obviously a no-brainer for everybody to undertake a project that's going to save you money and give you that ROI. These numbers are just numbers that we pull off. It's obviously different depending on where you are in the maturity level of your asset management. But we do have some examples of clients that have had some returns on investment, and I believe we will share these slides so you can peruse this at your own leisure. But we have a number of examples, and I'm sure Phil has a number of examples as well of clients that can say that they have definitely returned a certain level of percentage. And the mobile part is probably one in which that is really sort of trending, in the fact that we find a lot of our clients that are using mobile devices. We've got some companies up in Scotland using it for train management, and to move from paper to mobile is actually quite a big thing in terms of reducing the amount of time it takes to complete maintenance activities. And we mentioned it before, if it's simple for the engineer to complete something on the mobile device, they're more likely to do it anyway. And if you write something down, can you even read that when you put it back into the system? So using a mobile device actually really helps in terms of the accuracy of the data that you capture, but also the time that is saved by the engineers that do it. So that's something in which we see a very quick return on investment. Things like warranty management, forcing people to put through warranty claiming. But yeah, you can obviously read those through for yourself. So that's really what we're doing. A bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I think that probably brings us back to being on time. No disrespect to anyone. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Is there a tool within to measure productivity of the engineers?
Yeah, so as in utilisation of them. Yeah, so actually that's one of the metrics that we've built into our system to understand. Obviously, it's always a bit of a tricky one, that, because you have things like training and you have things like wrench time when they're moving to and from the job. So there are a couple of things that you need to understand, and we need to understand to get that to work. Yeah. 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 When we say industry focus, I think that what we do is we build certain things for certain clients who happen to be in certain industries. And so FM would be an example where we've done, for one of our clients, we've done quite a bit of work on condition surveys, where they're going around and they're seeing the quality of a wall or a door or a ceiling, and they use a mobile device to do that. And we built a whole kind of focus around that, where it actually allows them to justify spending capital spend on refurbishments, because they can justify they've got so many buildings that have bad walls. Let's do one big project and let's go and fix all those walls. So yes, yeah, and what we've done, we've used the tools within EAM to build up this kind of module, I guess, that we can. Yep. So not specifically, but no, not specifically with that. Yeah. So we give you data is one thing. Loading that data is with the industry entity A2X, and we can load that A2X thing. What we've given you is the functionality to have a process, a workflow that moves through. Yeah. So what we're trying to do, where we're trying to get to, is we have a great base layer at the moment, which is very generic, and we're trying to have that additional layer where we can work with clients to make improvements on our industry-specific areas. So we have some very strong industries, which I named there, but we're obviously looking for more people to build things with and improve that and roll it out. Okay. Great, that was quite short and sweet, wasn't it? So just so I like it. So fantastic. All right, well I think we've got a customer story next. So Mark's going to come up and talk to you a little bit about one of the implementations that we've had. I need to clip this on. Please put that somewhere. I'm not going to suggest. That's what you got to talk. Should just be able to do. Just here.
Next. Okay, thanks, Lee. Good afternoon or good evening to everyone. My name's Mark Smith. I'm the Group Financial Controller for Centamin PLC, which is a FTSE 250 company listed on the London market, with also a listing in on the Toronto Stock Exchange as well. So we're quite well listed and have quite a significant financial compliance program. But what I want to talk today about is our involvement with the Infor product and with Sapphire in general, and how we're going with our own EAM implementation. First of all, with the mining industry, generally the way the cycle is that you find an economic deposit, so you do your exploration, then you do an economic assessment, which is a feasibility study. Assuming it's profitable, it makes money, then you raise money via equity markets or the debt markets. You then move into a construction phase, and then ultimately you move into an operational phase. And why that's important to understand, because from the mining perspective, when we first go to source software, it's the financial software we start with first. And in certainly from my perspective and also from Centamin's perspective, it was the Sun product that we chose back in 2007. And I was the one who implemented Sun back in 2007 for Centamin. And I'd used Sun on several projects throughout Africa because it had French-speaking or French language capabilities. It was a very simple product to understand. The use of the chart of accounts can be straightforward. The ledger analysis codes and the A codes are very powerful. And when you add that with the Vision product, Vision Executive and Vision Q&A, it's a very powerful product. So from that financial perspective, you start your operation, or you start your business, and you can do all essentially your financial accounting in a very quick manner. It's very cost effective. It's a very, very good fit. Then when you come along and you get more sophisticated, you have to start bringing in your purchasing and your inventory and your asset management. That's when you have to start having a look around. Now, Centamin, again, many years ago, 10, 12 years ago, there was no comparable product that you would automatically associate with Sun. So there wasn't Infor Sun back then, and there definitely wasn't Infor EAM. So you were looking at a product that could, in one way, give you what you needed, but also integrate with Sun quite as seamlessly as you could possibly make it. So that's where we were. But when we became aware that, when I started with Centamin in 2007, I left after 3 years, and I rejoined back in 2015. I was aware in 2015 that the EAM product was around, and we sat down at board level and talked about essentially what our vision was for the business with software and systems. And it became very obvious that from a governance perspective, from an audit committee perspective, and from just a practical perspective, we wanted to have all the software under the same banner. And so that's where we decided to have a look at this Infor product. Personally, I was very curious about it because having used Sun since the early 90s when it was with Systems Union, I think was the maker, you always knew that if you could bring all of this together, it would be a very powerful combination. And for many years in the Australian market, the accountants would always favour Sun, and the maintenance people would go for another product. And the two of them would never talk, and you would never get the synergies available that you could. So Infor was given the first look at, well, Infor EAM was given the first look at because we already had Sun. And that is the mining industry and how it works in a lot of its perspective. Whoever gets their foot in the door with the financial software will generally get a first look at for the EAM. So that was the big driver for it. How we came to choose to work and logistics team. And what impressed me most was with Lee and with Steve was their knowledge of the product was just exceptional. It wasn't a case of when they were asked questions, oh, we don't know that, we'll get back to you, or we think it can do that. They were able to demonstrate an in-depth knowledge on the spot in front of the management team and the operational team. And they were able to do that in a very difficult environment where questions were coming at them left, right and centre in a very mixed up, jumbled, illogical environment. And even though the guys had prepared quite thoroughly to give a presentation, they very quickly picked up the way a lot of our management and our Egyptian employees worked, and they were able to roll with it, which was a very big factor in our management saying, yes, we want to go with this company because these guys know their product and they've been able to demonstrate in front of everyone that basic concept. They've been able to handle all the questions and they've been able to not just talk off a script. We actually brought up a test environment of EAM. They just handled everything. So when we finished the meeting, we had and that went most of the day. We then had a second meeting with the management team and they just said, yep, we want to go with this product. It was that quick. We asked them then to put together a comprehensive quotation, proposal, implementation plan. We needed that within a week because we had an audit committee meeting at Centamin. I needed to present that to the audit committee and then to the board. They produced it, very professionally done, tailored to our business. It wasn't just all about wordsmithing and concepts. They'd really picked up on what the key issues were for our business, what we wanted to do. It was very competitively priced, which is another reason of wanting to stay with Infor, because you could look at the SAP environment, but it is very, very costly. And relative to our business, we don't have the revenues or the profits to probably justify an SAP approach. But in saying that, Centamin is a company that likes to keep things very simple, very no frills. We just don't go in for the latest and greatest. We realise that to make money in our industry, we have to sweat the assets. We're in a remote environment. We have long lead times on most of our stock items. We have a very oppressive environment. It just doesn't rain in Egypt, so we get 365 days a year of sun. For about 5 months of the year, the midday temperature is around 45 degrees. Consequently, we have a higher wear rate on a lot of our steel-based wear liners. We have our tyre consumption goes through the roof. Yeah, it's a different environment, but the Sapphire guys were able to preempt that, and there's certainly the quotation that came across was exceptional. We approved it, and we got on with it essentially straight away. Essentially, the projects that we've done with Sapphire to date, there were two projects. The first project was what we called a database restructure project. And by that, what I meant is when we started Centamin, the mine, in 2007, the corporate office was based in Alexandria in Egypt. So we did all the group accounting in Egypt. And at that stage, we only had 5 entities. You could very simply use Sun's ledger analysis codes to do all the accounting by each entity, very straightforward. But as the company expanded, we've got exploration activity in Burkina Faso and Côte d'Ivoire. Within each of those locations, we have 4 individual entities. Some we've acquired, some we've started. So we've been trying to do all our accounting out of Egypt with a lot of spreadsheets going back and forth. And we realised that if we wanted to do the EAM project, it was best to geographically break out this software, put it in a cloud-based environment, and then just focus putting EAM on our Egyptian server. The reason we don't use the cloud-based environment for Egypt is the connectivity between Egypt and the cloud is just too slow. We're looking at over 1.5 seconds of latency. It's a very regulated environment in Egypt with respect to internet service providers, and Egypt in general is a very regulated market. So there's a number of hurdles there which we thought, no, it's too difficult. We want real-time speed, so we're basing everything in Egypt. And part of the replication, part of the restructure project was to put the other entities in the cloud, replicate the data from Egypt on a daily basis into the cloud so we can still do our group reporting. It's been a very successful project, very successful model. What it does is give us immediate expansion options into Burkina Faso and Côte d'Ivoire when we start those projects, where we already have the business unit created for those entities in the cloud. To open up Sun in those countries, we essentially just burn a disk of the cloud, of the business unit. We open up a server in Burkina Faso or Côte d'Ivoire. We put the disk in. We open up the Sun and the business unit there. We've already got the replication process working through Egypt, so we automatically have a real-time environment happening. And the one thing with these projects is the quicker you can get purchase order control into these projects on the ground, the more money you save. Because, I mean, African projects, just once they start, they consume money. And if you cannot control the checkbook, you've got a problem. And generally, these projects start so quickly that the finance people are scrapping around trying to get their systems in, while the construction people are already spending money on Excel-based systems. So it's just that option that we have now to go into these countries very quickly makes a lot of sense for us. The second project that we're doing is the EAM implementation, and we're probably in the middle of it. We're starting to get on the home straight towards implementation. Adele's our project manager. Lee, Steve have been the lead consultants. We're looking at go live date on the 2nd of April. And everything from the start of this project to the present day has been first class. It's been professional. It's been a very challenging project on many, many levels. Some of the things that Graham talked about, asset management strategies. Our guys haven't been strong on that. It's just about purely sweating the assets, maximum availability. That's probably been our big driver. So as we're having to migrate data over, having to move to a more sophisticated EAM environment, a lot of these concepts we're having to make decisions on. Steve in particular has been challenging our management to on these concepts because it drives so much of what we're going to do, how we set up the work order template, whether it's a preventative maintenance one with a frequency, whether it's a condition-based one, whether it's a breakdown one. And you know, we seem to be a business at site that's done more a breakdown, run to failure type approach. And while that has worked, it doesn't mean that's the way we should be going in the future. So we've had to challenge a lot of things in this process, and the guys have been at the forefront of challenging that and adding value, providing their creative insights into what other options are, which has been superb for us. So from a project management perspective, Dell's been very prompt and very diligent on managing the cost budget for us, alerting to us the possibility of any overruns, whether they be approved scope changes, whether they be possible project delays due to our own end user availability. Documentation has been always sent through in a timely manner. The weekly project meetings have been held come hell or high water. So I can't speak highly enough of how Sapphire have handled the project to date. The database project was a success. This one will be a success. We all know that every project has its ups and downs and its hurdles. However, if you keep it simple, you keep it clear, you'll get there. So that's, from my perspective, it's been a very, very successful association so far. Once we get on the back of the EAM project, then our next level of growth, or next level of, with respect to systems, is understanding what Sapphire and Infor can do more for sentiment. Lee's mentioned the business intelligence tools, which is something we're really interested in getting that in place and understanding better what that can do. In our environment, we're in a joint venture in Egypt with the government. It's what they call a profit sharing arrangement. We distribute profit every week to the government and to the parent company. So we have every Monday at the Sakari mine site in Egypt, the gold bars that have been produced for the week are picked up, transported to Cairo, put on a plane to Canada, which is where the refiner is. A week later, we get the gold proceeds back. So every week we're having a sale of a gold bars come into the company. We then automatically distribute what we believe is to be the mine-free cash flow margin to the government and to sentiment. So anything we can do within our financial processes to maximise the distribution while not unnecessarily affecting the ability of the business to pay debt, it's debts as and when they fall due, we look for. An area that we have an issue with is advance payments. Understanding whether we're paying within our credit terms or not. So there are many ways that we can use our products better to enhance what we do. These are some of the projects we're looking at. We want to try to look at the data replication process being further streamlined. Right now it's essentially a manual process, but as it's been working for a while now, the manual process is pretty much well refined. We could look at putting that onto a automatic calendar overnight, having it done. That's something we want to look at this year. And then obviously we want to start preparing for expansion into the other African countries that we're involved in, and how quickly we can do that. And while I haven't got the budgets or the funding available yet to commit to that, because we haven't committed to those projects, it doesn't mean we can't do the groundwork now to be ready to push the button, because it'll pay for itself 10, 20, 100 times over, getting the purchase order book, getting control of that straight away. What I mean by that is we have an approvals process on purchase orders where management can approve them before we make the commitment, rather than an Excel paper-based system which you don't have much control on. So that's essentially where we're at. Any questions? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
this. So thank you, Mark. Thank you for that. Thanks to all the speakers for today. So that's everyone who's going to speak. And thank you also to the marketing team for setting things up. And I think our first live stream hopefully has been a success. Getting some thumbs up over there, 50/50. But, so there's a couple of things just before we close off. So we have got like a networking and drinks now after this. So those that can stay, that would be great. And we can obviously, you can ask any questions and we can chat over anything that you want to discuss. You'll find in your packs that there's a feedback form. So at Sapphire, we're quite keen to understand your thoughts on the event and anything we can do to improve. Obviously, we like to run these things quite often, so it'd be good if we can get some honest feedback. That would be great. For those of you that are leaving straight away or leaving later, just a reminder that the exit's actually on the second floor, so some people get a bit confused sometimes. So although you're on the second floor, that will be the exit. So don't ride the lift up and down all night. So it may happen. But thank you for coming. And Taryn, where do we put the forms? Should they just hand them to?
Yes, just going to leave them on the side that there are.
Fabulous. And will drinks be in here? Yeah, fantastic. All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you.